let's go ahead and start with benefits and services. And I'm going to look to, do I say Jasmine or is it Yasmin? Jasmine. I just want to make sure. All right. Jasmine, I'll hand it to you.
Thank you. For the Director of Finance, Ms. Peralt. Present. Mr. Tang.
Present.
Ms. Yamamoto.
Here.
Ms. Bradford.
Here.
For the State Treasurer, Mr. Henning.
We don't know.
Okay.
Cyberspace.
Chairperson Hendricks, you have a quorum.
Great. Thanks, Jasmine.
And I have a brief statement.
Perfect.
If I may.
Thank you.
The CalSTRS board meetings are live web streamed, video archived, and available to the public on calstrs.com. Individuals who wish to address the board should wait for the 10-minute public comment period at the end of the agenda item the speaker wishes to address. For comments not pertaining to a specific agenda item, there will be an opportunity for additional statements at the end of the open session. Each speaker is allowed a maximum of 3 minutes to comment. However, if there is not enough time for each speaker to have 3 minutes, the timing will be at the discretion of the chair. To protect the privacy of speakers under the age of 18 who wish to address the board, only their first name and affiliated organization may be provided, but other personal identifying information, such as their last name, age, or school, may not be shared. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jasmine. All right. So item 1 is approval of the committee agenda.
So moved.
It's been moved
Second.
and seconded. Any edits? I see him. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. We have an approved agenda. Item number 2 are minutes from May. Karen, any edits?
Nope. Move.
Move approval? Okay, and it's been seconded by Ken. Thanks. Any other edits, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you. All right, we're heading over to Tom Buffalo. Hi, Tom. We're going to hear about our annual member highlights, or insights, I should say. So I'll hand it to you, Tom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. Madam Chair, members of the committee, Buffalo Head of Research. These are insights into our members via our annual member survey.
Great.
First, some demographic information about the respondents. First off, there were over 2,000 active respondents to the survey, over 1,000 retired respondents. The survey goes out every year in January, and essentially members are asked to kind of reflect back over the prior year. So by and large, this reflects their impressions and sentiments around CalSTRS for 2023, even though we call this the 2024 member survey. Just a few statistics to kind of marvel at from this member's perspective. Right there in that middle grouping are active respondents, youngest 21, maybe not a surprise. Oldest respondent was 80, which is very nice. Again, this is an emailed survey, and so they are asked to engage with us electronically, and so nice to see. Just to the right of that, maximum service credit, 48.2 years. I mean, that's just some remarkable longevity there for being in the classroom. Also, the bottom grouping, our oldest respondent was 101. So again, that's just something to marvel at, I think. And then maximum service credit of our retired respondents, 50 years in the classroom. So just well done there.
That is amazing. I want to know if that 80-year-old is in the community colleges or K through 12. I want to know that information.
No,
I would bet on that one. You think kindergarten? No way. No way. No way. Interesting.
So first set of data, right out the gate, we asked them their overall satisfaction with CalSTRS. The way that you're going to see most of this data throughout the report is we measure this on a scale from 1 to 7, 1 being the lowest, in this case, completely dissatisfied, all the way up to 7 being completely satisfied. And typically the data that you see in front of you is going to be the aggregation of the 6s and the 7s. So those that rated it satisfied and then completely satisfied. So again, like I said, right at the gate, we just asked the members this question. This is a gut response. You know, how satisfied are you with CalSTRS overall? 64% rated either 6 or a 7. Now, last year, you may recall I mentioned, or we saw evidence that satisfaction had actually gone down a little bit from a statistical perspective. And we did some digging, and we determined that that decrease in satisfaction was likely related to the members' confidence in having enough money to live comfortably in retirement. There's some data on that later in this presentation that shows where they are today or as of this year. But we believe that that lowered confidence brought a satisfaction down to a statistically significant decrease. And then the impetus for that lowered confidence was most likely, the economy, interest rates, and inflation ultimately. And so, with some signs of inflation easing, they are easing at the macro level. We'll see if that sort of trickles down to the pocketbook as the year closes out. But it'll be interesting to see, going into next year when we conduct the survey in February or in January, where members' confidence is at that time. We wove this in last year. This actually isn't from the survey per se, but this is still survey data. So following every phone call, the member has an opportunity via phone to respond to how satisfied were they with the call overall, their interaction with the CalSTRS representative. And so this data, based on 50,000 responses to their interaction via phone, 97% rated CalSTRS, either satisfied or very satisfied. So, the survey data has got some signals suggesting that our service levels are very strong, and that this is a very strong signal that members are very happy once they interact with a CalSTRS representative. We also measure engagement. So engagement is considered kind of a step above just that base level of satisfaction. It incorporates some other items, which I'll show you here in a second. But essentially, we take 5 different items, satisfaction's included with that, and we compose this average, an average engagement score, and then we measure how many members, or how many respondents in this case, scored above a certain level. So in this case, how many members scored above a 5.5? So the satisfaction questions included here, and there's some of the other engagement items. They rate their satisfaction there, and then we average that. But essentially, about 56% of respondents scored higher than a 5.5 in engagement with CalSTRS. And typically what we see, it's not here, but it's in the report, engagement increases with age. We look at it by age cohort, so 20 to 29 tends to be our lowest level engagement, probably not surprisingly. And then we measure all the way up to 60 plus of our active membership. And then certainly our retired members are reflect the highest engagement with us. These are the engagement items. Not all of them go into the score, kind of moving from left to right on the top. The middle one, I feel confident my retirement is secure. I know CalSTRS operates in my best interest. CalSTRS acts ethically. Bottom one in the middle, CalSTRS sends communications relevance to my needs. And CalSTRS listens to its members. Those items go into the engagement score. However, overall, these are also measured on that same 7-point scale. So 1 would be kind of the low end of the scale, 7 would be the high. And so, for example, CalSTRS is an organization I can trust. 73% of the respondents either rated as agree or strongly agree that CalSTRS is an organization that I can trust.
Tom, can you help us as we're looking at these? I mean, when we look at these numbers, how are we supposed to interpret them? Because I think a lot of us are trying to think of things like in terms of grades or looking at numbers. And I'm just wondering if you could help us, like when you look at CalSTRS listens to members, that's at 50%. So how should we feel about that, or how should we interpret that?
Yeah, good point. In fact, Vice Chair Yamamoto, last year you had the same concern about CalSTRS listens to its members. Again, the 50% does reflect those who score 6 or a 7.
Okay.
And then roughly an additional 40% scores in that neutral range. So anywhere from 3 to 5. Okay. Leaving essentially 5%. So all of these measures, the bottom end, which would be the 1 and the 2, which would be completely or strongly disagree and then disagree, that's only about 5%. Okay, but to address your concern from last year and then the chair's concern today, what we did is we actually gave the members an opportunity that scored, in this case, 1, 2, or 3 on this specific measure of CalSTRS listens to its members. Tell us more why that is. Mm-hmm. Now, there wasn't really a strong signal from, there's a lot of disparate kind of comments there. Not many, in fact, not the full 5% of people who may have scored 1 or 2 answered with an open-ended response. And the responses were a little disparate. It went from things like, I didn't get the resolution I was looking for. I don't want my money to go. I don't want to be obligated to put my money into CalSTRS. Right. There was some political commentary there. There was commentary we should divest, and then there's commentary we shouldn't divest. So it was a little bit all over the board, and there wasn't like a direct signal as to why they were that dissatisfied. But overall, about 95% are either just sort of neutral on this, or as you can see here, 50% at least agree or strongly agree that CalSTRS listens to its members.
Okay.
As we saw with the post-call data, now this extends to all interactions with CalSTRS members, not just the call center, but this could be from our service retirement, any number of different business areas that has experience with our members. But courtesy was rated very high, knowledge about CalSTRS, understanding the questions or concerns, displaying a caring attitude, took appropriate action, and knowledge. So, here at very least, 8 out of 10 members are very satisfied with, the staff and their courtesy and their knowledge and just that interaction with them. Performance as well, responded in a timely manner. Questions or answers to the questions were thorough. Follow through, the information was easy to understand. It was easy to reach a representative. And information from multiple sources. So essentially, at the very least, 7 out of 10 members, almost 8 out of 10 members felt strongly about these measures as well, relative to the service they received from CalSTRS.
Did you want to ask a question on this, Karen?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Karen.
So this means that it's active as far as retired as well, correct?
Correct, yeah.
I think I asked it the same thing last time, but I wasn't
right.
sure if it says that. Okay, thank you.
Here's another measure of, it's kind of a step up from satisfaction and a step up from engagement. This is Net Promoter Score. We've been kind of working with this measure for a couple of years now. This one might look the most familiar to you as just a general consumer. You might get these from some of your service providers, maybe after you interacted with them, or maybe they just sort of send you a survey out of the blue. But this question will often come up a lot. And the question is, how likely are you to recommend, Amazon, Nike, Samsung, Amazon, whoever, to a friend or colleague, okay? And so the rating scale is a little different. We adopted this from the originator of this rating. So it's on a 10-point scale. And essentially the calculation goes like this. Anybody who rates a 9 or a 10 under this methodology is known as a promoter. And then anyone who rates a 0 through 6 is known as a detractor. You subtract the detractors from the promoters and you get this score. So essentially your score can range anywhere from -100 up to 100, and that gives you kind of that relative index to how people are scoring. So the assumption here is that promoters are going to speak highly about you. They're going to buy your products and services, really engage with you, all the way down to the other end, which you're higher on the detractor end. You're not going to do those things. And so just like we see with engagement, this measure increases with age. The highest Net Promoter Score would come from our retired members. But that sort of orangish horizontal line, that's 17, that's the overall average of the respondents to the survey. And to give you some perspective on where that would fall, just here's some common brands, just kind of randomly chosen to an extent, some financial services firms here, but if CalSTRS, now CalSTRS is compulsory, the members don't have a choice, they just have to be there. And so the way we've altered that question is we say, how likely are you to recommend or promote CalSTRS as a great organization? So it's not recommending for purchase, but more just to try to get a proxy for, if this was a service, how might it rank relative to kind of a general marketplace? And we see it's 17, sits, kind of in that Morgan Stanley Citigroup area, if you will. If you like Amazon, I think most people do, you can kind of see where CalSTRS rates relative to Amazon. And then some there at the bottom, if you've ever had experiences with some of those service providers down there, you might concur with some of those scores. But 17 seems like it's pretty decent relative to a kind of a competitive marketplace. So this goes back to what I'd first talked about. This measure, there was evidence last year that this measure was driving satisfaction just enough to register as statistically significant as a decrease. And so kind of moving from left to right, we've got active, retired, active, retired. So we'll look at active versus active. So active 2023, skip one, and then active 2024. That top two, those who rated confident and very confident was 35% last year. Statistically unchanged at 37% this year. But again, we'll see what happens in 2025 as members reflect on this year. Again, some of the easing, inflation that may occur, and again, maybe that extends down to the pocketbook and things are looking up for them. And we'll see if that has a potential corresponding bump to satisfaction overall in 2025. The retired members seem a little less fazed by that. What we see is that confidence goes up, the closer you get to retirement. And then once you're there, it's almost like it doesn't seem so scary anymore because you're living it. You kind of understand your income and your expenses, and you're kind of able to maybe weather some more of those storms because you've lived it a little bit more than the actives who have a little more uncertainty on their time horizon. We live in a world where a lot of things are easy, so it is nice to see that members also consider going through the retirement process easy. 69% rated this as either easy or very easy. Again, that's 7-point scale. And similar to a lot of the data in the survey, it's roughly another 40-ish%, 45% that's in that neutral range. And so it's really only 5-ish% that say it was difficult or very difficult to go through the retirement process.
And this is for people who are doing it online and in person?
Correct, yeah.
It's the total, okay. Great.
On the final slide, relative to CalSTRS' mission to secure the financial future and sustain the trust of California educators, it is good to see nearly 9 out of 10 retired members are enjoying their retirement or satisfied with their retirement. So I think that speaks well to our progress toward our mission. So that actually concludes my comments. I'm happy to answer any questions.
That's a good one. Thank you, Tom. Does anyone from the committee have any questions? I guess my only question is, so when you and your team go through and do this analysis, what do you do with this now? Once you've been able to get the information from our customers, how do you take this information and apply it to what we do at CalSTRS moving forward?
Yeah, typically we share it with communications. That's one of our first stops, and they can take nuggets of information, kind of weave them into their messaging. Did you know X number of CalSTRS members feels this way about X, Y, and Z, or does this type of thing? And so that's been helpful to see, to have that kind of woven into our messaging. The other thing we're going to be doing is kind of folding in some more retirement readiness types of questions into this round for the 2025 survey. See if we can get some additional measures around that. And then, possibly sharing that with our proper retirement readiness group to see if that can help advance any of the things that they're working on.
I'd love to figure out a way for us to get more input from our members about what we can do to, I'm assuming we ask that in some different ways, but what we can do to improve this process so the numbers go up, so that we make it is it frictionless? Is that the right word? A frictionless process or just an easier process? I'd love to, maybe we do that already, but I certainly get a lot of opinions when I talk to people. But I just wonder how we get input from our members in terms of feedback on how to improve. How do we do that? Kate, do you want to? I'll tee you up for your next presentation right there, so.
I hope you don't mind.
No.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. All right. Let's see if this pops on for me. If everyone can hear me. It's still red.
That's good.
Oh. Thank you. All right. I'm Kate LeBlanc. I'm the Director of Retirement Readiness. And I think, Sharon, this is a good kind of teaser for an item that we're planning to add to the January agenda.
Okay.
We have been engaged in a strategic plan initiative around customer experience. So we have been working with a third-party vendor who happens to be the same one that's doing our innovation project. And we've been, we're in about month 6 or 7 of a year-long engagement to do an assessment of customer experience at CalSTRS as it is now, identify opportunities, do journey maps, map out an ideal operational model to implement a organization-wide customer experience structure, and then a potential roadmap for implementation that we could consider, balancing priorities and resources. And so that's scheduled to end in February, and that'll position us to make those determinations. And some of that relates to the data that Tom's been sharing. But as far as what goes into it, a lot of the initial work that we did with them were focus groups, individual interviews across career stages, staff interviews. So a lot of that work has been gathered as part of that initiative. And then ultimately, depending on how that program looks when it is implemented, there would be a component of that related to the measurement strategy around actionable feedback, right? Through all of the different survey methodologies that we employ, where are the opportunities to take open-ended comments, overall trends and sentiments, assign it to a business area, and be able to measure how effectively we are at enacting change or improving overall customer experience. So
Great.
we're
So stay
looking forward to
tuned
bringing
for
that to you
January.
in
Okay.
January.
That sounds great, Kate. Thank you. And thank you, Tom. I don't see any other questions, so thank you for the research. We really appreciate it. Kate, you can just stay
just
on
stay
up there
seated.
if you want to. And it looks like I saw Patrick in the audience and Carrie. Hi, come on up, and we are going to hear about our defined contribution program update. And I'm just going to do a commercial because my colleague Jessica St. Paul, who's in the audience from my local 1521, we just had a big benefits conference on Friday, and CalSTRS came, and we had Pension 2 people there, and you guys were like the popular kid at school. It was like the table, and I had so many members saying to me, I came to this like the last 2 years, and they keep thinking I'm going to sign up, and then I don't. And I literally like walked the guy over to the Pension 2 table and just went, you are signing up now. We're making this happen. But I do think more of our members are really eager to figure out ways. I think people are stressed about the cost of eggs and other things. And but also, we were lucky enough to negotiate a raise this year. And so, I always tell people when you get a raise, try and put that money in a 403B or something like that. So I'm really excited to hear your presentation because I think this is something that our members really appreciate and don't always understand. And so promoting it more and more in the worlds that we're in, the districts that we're in, the better. So with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Kate, and your team.
I just wanted to see if there's any public comment for the.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Brian. Was there any
There are
pub?
no members of the public in the queue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to call you, Samantha, I want to call you the Lord. Maybe God is female, so thank you, Samantha. So yes, thank you, and thank you, Brian. Go ahead, Kate.
That was a perfect introduction, so thank you for that, and always happy to hear those anecdotes. The team really does do a good job. They're passionate about it, and you'll see some of that sentiment reflected in some of the data that we're going to be presenting to you today. So again, I'm Kate LeBlanc. I'm the Director of Retirement Readiness, and joining me today are two key staff who oversee our defined contribution program. So we have with you today Carrie Fisher-Stone. She's the Assistant Director of Retirement Readiness, and she brings a wealth of experience both at CalSTRS and from the defined contribution industry overall itself. We also have Patrick Bivens. He has overseen or been part of Pension 2 for many years, since 2008 with his long career at CalSTRS. So he manages the staff and the operations of the program. So today's presentation is an information item. It's meant to ensure a shared understanding of some of the concepts that Sharon teed up really well as far as overall the defined contribution component of our hybrid retirement system. And we're going to be sharing with you today its purpose, its program structure, and really that gets to some of the concepts that you heard from Tom about income into retirement, confidence about income into retirement, awareness about what income will be necessary. And we know from industry insights that all of us should be aiming for upwards of 90% of our working income to be replaced in retirement. And the CalSTRS defined benefit and defined benefit supplement cover a majority of that for most of our members, but most of them will have a gap to fill to get up to that comfortable retirement income. And the most common way to do that is to have multiple income sources. We also know that our California educators cannot rely on a full Social Security benefit. So there's high criticality that members understand the need for supplemental savings, and then they have good options to invest their money and ensure that they can fund that secure financial future. So we'll be discussing the program, its structure, how it's funded. And I know for a lot of you, this will be review and refresher, but we're also going to bring some new content to give updates on growth, some recent enhancements, as well as strategic opportunities that we're assessing and pursuing for the overall program. And we are going to start with a focus on the overall marketplace, the 403B marketplace in California, and its impacts on educators and some of the challenges that they face navigating that and understanding their options. So Patrick is going to begin today with a relevant case study of 2 teachers in one of our Southern California school districts.
Great. Well, thank you, Kate. And on behalf of the Pension 2 team, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you guys about your defined contribution programs, Pension 2 and 403B Compare. So I think the best way for us to kick off the impact of the marketplace is to share a story. Probably not likely the best right after you had lunch, but we'll make this quick. Now, we do hear from our CalSTRS members. Again, I've been here since 2008. I've heard a lot of stories in regards to somebody who's just first encountered a 403B or a 457 and what they've run into. And I'm sure you have as well. This story is about 2 teachers. This comes from Dan Otter. So a lot of you know Dan Otter. He's well-renowned. He's a very strong advocate in the 403B marketplace. Yeah. And so he's been doing a great job of spreading the word and letting people know about sort of the hurdles and barriers that come with entering into this marketplace. But he shared with us last year the story of the 2 teachers. And so I'm just going to go ahead and share that same story with you guys today. So think of it as you've got Redlands Unified School District. You have 2 educators that are age 22 starting out. They heard about 403Bs. They're going to contribute $5,000 a year to their 403B plan. They're going to earn a 7% assumed rate of return, and they're going to contribute until age 60. First educator, after all that time, accumulates a little bit over $500,000. And the second educator, after all the time, accumulates almost $800,000. So after contributing and after knowing too that they start at the same age 22, $5,000 a month, or $5,000 a year, I'm sorry, assumed rate of return of 7%, why are the differences so great? And I'm sure you already have an idea. The hint is in the title, just in case you're wondering, fees. Fees matter. And so it's important for us to understand these fees. And so through this, Dan Otter explained to us, like the first educator is invested in a fund that's charging 2.3% in fees. And for us, we like to refer in basis points to 230 basis points. And I'm going to just say basis points is a fancy term for 0.01%. And I'm sharing that with you because throughout this presentation, we'll call things by basis points. So 2.3% for the first educator invested in that fund. Second educator invested in the CalSTRS Pension 2 program, which was less than 0.5% or 0.45%, or 45 basis points. Of that, the administrative fee for the CalSTRS Pension 2 program, just to run our program, is 25 basis points, or 1/4%. So the remainder of that fee is based on the elections that the educator would have selected with their investment options, whether it was our Vanguard, Dodge and Cox American funds. And that totals up to that 0.45. So here is a slide that actually really gives the basis behind our Pension 2 program. But for what Dan wants to do is share with you about the fees. You know, we always educate on the power of time and money, but fees matter. So you've got 2.3%, again, for the first educator, 0.45 for the second, a difference of 1.85%. Now, 1%, 2%, if you talk to somebody, doesn't seem like a lot. But as you can see here, over the time, it's over $250,000 in difference between the 2 accounts, or specifically $283,808. A very big chunk of change to miss out on just because of a percentage or 2. So fees matter. He also gives us a great insight into these 403B barriers, as he called them. And so he's kind of highlighted a few of them with our team and said, like, you know, let's talk about the different vendors that are offered at the school districts. Let's talk about the communication that educators might receive. And let's talk about those agents that just show up. And so I want to share that with you too. And I'm sure I see you guys already nodding and smiling. You know about these. And so first, we'll talk about the vendor list. Now, in 1970, the insurance industry in California changed things, changed the landscape of the 403B marketplace.
What year was it, Patrick?
1970.
1970, okay.
Yeah, they passed through some legislation that prohibited employers to going out and doing a competitive bid on their 403B plans. So there used to be single vendor 403B plans. Like as a fiduciary, you would vet and you would select what you thought were the best in class. They wanted options. They wanted choice. And so through that, the insurance code 770.3 we all hear about allows for what we know as the any willing provider provision. Say that 4 times. Any willing provider provision. And so now we have upwards of 51 approved vendors, 403B vendors in the state of California. Dan gives us, Redlands Unified, 38 vendors that are approved. And so the list of vendors are different from employer to employer. And that's really based on either the employer or the third-party administrator that they contract with that has these information agreements with these vendors. So you could have a lot, you could have very little. But in the case here with the Redlands Unified, 32 of these are in the red category. And so he gives us some criteria for his grading structure of the stoplight chart. And he says, those in red, they have wrap fees, they have commission sales reps, they might have surrender charges, they do a lot of cross-selling, and they have administrative fees over 1% or 100 basis points. For those in the yellow, he says no upfront or back-end load fees, there's no commissions or surrender charges, but they are over 40 basis points for the administrative fee. And then for those in green, such as CalSTRS Pension 2, no upfront or back-end load fees, we have no surrender charges, no commission sales reps, no wrap fees, and we're less than that 40 basis points. Just looking at the list, you wouldn't be able to make a decision if you didn't understand 403Bs. But just looking at 32 of those being in the red, rolling the dice isn't going to be very good for an educator if you were just to pick one. So he also talks about the communications that educators would receive. And so I'll just read this out because it's kind of fun to do. This is very generic. Employees receive an email from their HR department. Subject, attention staff, 403B rep on site Friday. Good morning. During your lunch periods on Friday, representatives from the vendor will be available on site in the staff lounge as a resource to answer any questions you may have regarding financial strategies and payroll deductions for your 403B regards human resources. This happens very often. Oh, you're on top of Karen. We're getting to that next. Happens very often, and this poses a big issue, especially for those who are not familiar with 403B plans. They're not even familiar that they even have options available to them. They may not know about that approved vendor list. And for most of us, when we get an email, we think advertisement, spam, might be something else, especially from finance, right? Well, this is coming from your HR department. So I'm betting a lot of people showed up on Friday to find out what that was about and probably signed up. Now, Karen, you're absolutely right. The pizza and donut guy is there too, or lady. And so this happens very often. We hear this about probably the most out of all the complaints we get. Somebody came on campus, whether they were invited or not, and we're in the lounge, lunchroom, brought the donuts, the sandwiches, the pizza, and they're very nice people, extremely, very nice, better dressed than I am. And they're coming out there and they're talking about the CalSTRS or CalPERS retirement. They're talking about the financial gap that Kate, alluded to about needing the 90-95%, and they're providing their supplemental savings products or options. So they're speaking to the same lingo and messaging that we do, but they're selling their high-price annuity products, and that's an issue. So let's speak to the Pension 2 program. All of those that we just talked about are the main sort of reasons why we entered into this marketplace. And so I'll give you guys a mission statement and some of the objectives. But again, I thought Dan Daughter's story was relevant to the point of the basis of the Pension 2 program. So our mission statement, very simple. Providing educators a low-cost, high-quality supplemental savings plan that can help bridge their financial gap. Again, from what they might receive to what they ought to have that industry experts are saying. And our objectives are clear and simple too. We educate members on the CalSTRS Pension 2 program. And I was just talking with Sharon earlier, when I first started in 2008, no one knew CalSTRS offered a Pension 2 or a 403B or even a 457 plan. And it was an awareness campaign. And that goes with a lot of the low-cost providers that are out there. We just don't have the manpower to get out there in front of these folks all the time. But we do provide also a lot of financial education. We do workshops, webinars. We have a lot of online resources and communications. We engage employers to offer Pension 2. So oftentimes, again, with those third-party administrators for the districts, we may or may not be on that list. And if you can imagine Redlands Unified, if there were no low-cost providers on the list, then it's really a bad situation for somebody. And so members will let us know, I heard about Pension 2. I realized talking to my department, you're not offered. What can you do? We will actively engage those employers and do our best. And I know Lisa's behind me. We are working on stuff with employers. It's not always the choice of us. I mean, we want to be in every single school district, but we have to continue to educate the employer on the importance of having this, a low-cost provider such as Pension 2. And that really comes down to the influence in the 403B marketplace. All of what we've just talked about with the story and our objectives here kind of tie into why CalSTRS is a low-cost leader in this marketplace. Now, I started in 2008. There was about 88 fourth B providers in the state of California offering products. Most of these were high-priced annuity companies. We're now down to 51. So we are, inflicting change in the marketplace. And I think we'll continue to do so as long as we continue to educate and engage our membership on supplemental savings plans, why fees matter, and why, to go with a program like Pension 2. So Pension 2 program has products, services, and resources. So I want to touch on those just to kind of, share and train with you guys. So with our Pension 2 program, we offer a 403B plan and a 457B plan. And so this is just very high level. We also offer a post-tax option or a Roth 403B or a Roth 457, as long as the school districts allow for it and they have the payroll capabilities. But this is our offering right here, a 403B and 457 with a Roth. Now, once a member or an employer has this approved, the employees have the ability to invest in one of three options. On the left-hand side, you'll see the Build Your Own portfolio, which is where we have 20-plus core funds, that we call it. Our investment staff, Pension 2, and our consultants have selected these for our participants to choose from. And so they could build their own portfolio. We give them like the pie chart, 100%. You allocate how you see fit. Now, if you're more hands-off, you could choose what we call the easy choice portfolios, or as most of you know, as target date funds. And we just ask you two questions, and that is going to be your expected retirement dates, or it's going to be your risk tolerance, whether you're conservative, moderate, or aggressive. So once you've answered those two, we have a portfolio that's already designed with the equity and the fixed income allocation built in. And so in the third option is for those who are financially savvy, who don't see the fund that they want to be in, and they want to kind of take control of it. We do offer a brokerage account through Charles Schwab. So with that said, we also have participant services. And so with CalSTRS, we do an amazing job already of promoting the hybrid retirement system. So Pension 2 and 4th We Compare are already in our sessions, our materials, our communications that go out. So I want to speak more specifically to like the Pension 2 offering. So we do offer individual sessions specifically for Pension 2. Our hybrid benefit specialists conduct these. They have the knowledge from the defined benefit, defined contribution side of the house. We also do statement comparisons through our record keeper. This is a very sought after service that a lot of our membership participants like. And it's because a lot of them have already signed up for a 403B provider, and then they hear about CalSTRS Pension 2. And so they're wondering, did I make a good decision? Can you help me do a comparison? It's a free, no cost evaluation to meet with somebody. You bring your quarterly statements, we'll look at the costs, look at the performance, and let you know. And we have an amazing team that runs our DC support line here at CalSTRS, manned by CalSTRS staff, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. We also offer an array of workshops and webinars every month and on demand for the school districts that are looking for it. And we attend most of the DC conferences that are out there, benefits fairs, onboarding, retirement incentives, you name it. So with that said too, kind of talked about it a little bit, but we do a lot of marketing communication. We work very closely with our communications team in-house. We also work with our record keeper to be able to just sort of provide a lot more financial education out there, whether it's announcements, updates, about the resource or tools, but we actively engage them as much as we can to provide the education. And I've kind of just bullet pointed some of those out there for you. Now, switching gears, a couple more slides here. 4thWeCompare.com is the other defined contribution program that we also have here at CalSTRS, separate from Pension 2 completely. So we don't tie them together. This is an unbiased website, and it was in my notes here real quick. 2002, legislation was passed that actually mandated that the 4th We Compare site be created, and that CalSTRS maintained this site too. So anybody who's offering a 403B has to register and update their information on this site, whether it's performance, fees, contact information. So again, so like Redlands Unified, those 38, they would have had to gone through the 4th We Compare site to make sure that they were an offering. So let me give you kind of a high-level overview of the site itself. I just kind of took a snapshot here. So in 4th We Compare, it launched in 2004, and the site allows you to browse or research any of the 4th We providers out there. And it's very intuitive. You select your employer, there'll be an approved vendor list to look at. You can click on that, get information for each one of those. And then also we have like salary reduction agreements. So if somebody's already looking to enroll, they can also set up their contributions after they've enrolled. And there's contact information for the employers or their third-party administrators. But this site is specifically built to do comparisons. And so it's built to do a 403B side-by-side comparison of 3 different 403Bs. So if you have one, you can compare it against 2 others that you know. If you don't know anything about 4 through Bs, this has a great glossary. It's got some videos, great resource for getting somebody started. Again, completely separate from Pension 2, unbiased education. So with that said, I'm going to pass this over to Carrie Fisher-Stone, our Assistant Director, who's going to talk about the program growth, our funding, as well as sort of our path forward with Pension 2. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you, Pat, and good afternoon, everyone. So we'd like to shift to talking a little bit about the remarkable growth that the Pension 2 program has seen, both in program participation and assets under management, particularly in this last decade. And this has really been driven by the efforts of our staff. We call our team small but mighty, in partnership with our record keeper partners at Voya. And this growth reflects the increased awareness and value that our members place on this program in supporting their financial futures. So this chart illustrates the sustained growth we've seen in the number of Pension 2 participants. We've been with our current record keeper, as Pat mentioned, Voya, since 2015, and you'll notice that we've seen really steady growth over those years with an average year-over-year growth rate of 16.5%. In 2008, you'll see we had just over 4,300 participants, and currently we're at nearly 34,000 participants. So clearly we're seeing an impact when it comes to increased program awareness and the program being really well received by our participants. And then similarly, as a result of this increased participation, as well as, favorable market conditions, some of the services that we offer, we've also seen a tremendous 17% year-over-year growth rate in overall assets under management. We started at nearly $150 million in 2008, and we just closed the last fiscal year at $2.5 billion. Yeah. And I just want to state too, before going into the funding structure, this is an upward trajectory we're really excited about. We think it really positions us for continued success. At the same time, we know it's going to be really essential to continue to adapt to the increasing demands of the program to ensure we're really well equipped to meet the future challenges and opportunities of this membership. So I want to talk a little bit about our funding structure and provide a brief overview of how the program generates its revenue. Pension 2 operates in a revenue neutral space, so that means that the revenue that's generated by the program is used to cover its operational costs without seeking any profit. This is something that differentiates us from a number of competitors in the 403(b) marketplace, and it allows us to minimize our expenses and pass those savings directly to our participants in the form of lower fees. All revenue that's generated from program administrative fees is directed into the Teachers Defined Contribution Fund, or what we call the TDCF. This fund is specifically designated to support the operational and administrative needs of the defined contribution programs. And it's important to note that the TDCF is completely separate. It's a separate fund from the Teachers Retirement Fund, or what we know as the TRF, that holds the assets of the CalSTRS defined benefit program. So by design, the two funds cannot be commingled in any fashion. So Pension 2 generates its own revenue through administration fees charged to participants in the form of basis points, as Pat mentioned earlier, on assets under management. For our program, that's 25 basis points applied annually. This is a very low competitive fee by industry standards. These fees are assessed quarterly, so participants will see a small deduction from their account every 3 months. And this is a type of fee structure that's a self-sustaining model, so it ensures that the program can fund its operations independently without relying on external funding sources. And then this slide just gives us a practical example. If a Pension 2 participant has $10,000 in their account, they would be charged $25 per year, which breaks down to $6.25 per quarter. And then the revenue that's generated from these fees is split between our program and the record keeper to cover the costs of both our program operations and managing participant accounts. So just to wrap up, we want to share that the Pension 2 team is dedicated to continuously seeking ways to enhance our program, our participant services, really looking for ways to improve, and several key areas here are highlighted on this slide. First and foremost is adopting a mindset of continuous improvement. That's really central to our strategy as we're looking at our current state, we're planning for the future, and especially as we aim to really sustain this awesome program growth. Strengthening relationships and our collaboration with key partners and stakeholders is also an area of focus, and that includes not just the relationship we have with Voya, but working with our school districts, our TPAs. This is very much a relationship business, and these partnerships are crucial to enhancing our outreach and service delivery efforts. Early engagement is another area. We're leveraging a customer experience approach to really enhance engagement with educators from the very earliest stages. We know that's a goal that we've had. And this includes targeted strategies to communicate the importance of saving early, really ensuring that our offerings are clear across various channels, and finding new ways at key touch points with CalSTRS to promote Pension II, and also just the benefits of supplemental savings generally. We're also conducting various resource assessments, so we're continually evaluating our staffing, our resources to ensure we have the right level of support in place to meet our participants' evolving needs. We're looking at program data, we're reviewing resource allocation. We're also looking closely at the stability of our existing staffing model and identifying potential risks within that model. We are focused on evaluating participant satisfaction. So we've been collaborating with Tom's team at Enterprise Strategy Management to transition from annual surveys to new point of service surveys. This shift will allow us to capture real-time insights into participant experiences, their sentiments around individual transactions, and will, help us identify more targeted improvements to drive satisfaction and engagement. And then finally, we plan to continue to enhance online access by expanding our digital tools and resources to make interactions easier. One example is this past June, we implemented a new online self-service scheduling tool for Pension II appointments. That led to a 41% increase in appointments compared to the same period last year. So expanding user-friendly digital solutions remains a top priority as we continue to adapt and innovate. With that concludes the presentation, and we're happy to take any questions that you have. Thank you.
Great. I have a few questions. I don't see any questions from committee members. So I'll start us off, and if you guys have other questions. Oh, I love that picture. I was wondering how small and mighty the team was, so thank you for the photo. I have a couple questions. Do we have data on where Pension II is in the state in terms of districts? So I know we have 72 community college districts, I believe. So I'm just curious, out of the 72 community college districts, what percentage have Pension II? K through 12, what percentage? So I don't know if you have that. Do you have that information or?
So that is data that we've been pursuing, and we're actively trying to validate it before we share anything, even internally and publicly. But that has been an area of focus in the last nearly 2 years since I've been here, as far as how do we measure success, and particularly for new plan adoptions. We've had growth targets that have been aggressive, and we've been very successful in expanding, especially in the charter school population. But we are currently in the process of seeing if there's a better way to measure that in terms of overall market share as a percentage, like you're talking about. And there's just some challenges in terms of the number of schools, in particular charter schools, introduce some complexity there. And then the data from our record keeper that manages each of those individual plans and the plan documents versus how we categorize an employer at CalSTRS. So we're working to kind of validate that and then set a target associated with that. And as far as could we narrow it down to different subsets, that would be an ideal next step for us.
It just seems like that could be, and also it sounds like something AI could do. But where you could look at population, like LACCD, that's the largest community college district, LAUSD, obviously. So I'm like, can you triage and say, okay, what are the biggest districts to the smallest? And then maybe, take the first 30 largest, at least start there or something.
Absolutely.
Anyway, it's just thoughts about market share, and then just being strategic about where you spend time, benefits conferences, where you, not that you ignore other districts, but just kind of, I don't know, it just seems like a little bit of whack-a-mole to me.
It is, yeah, especially because that metric changes as
Right.
different agreements come in with third-party administrators, and in some cases, they'll discontinue offering pension two.
Right.
And so that's something as far as, Carrie mentioned, assessing the resourcing and scaling. That's an area of opportunity as far as relationship management, active
Yeah.
relationship management with those employers and prioritizing some of the ones that have more of an impact on outreach for educators.
Yeah. So there's been almost 55 years that we've had any willing provider. And I remember, I think I was right before I was coming on the board, that there was an effort to be able to kind of winnow down the amount and the insurance, no offense to the insurance, if anyone's watching, but, it just seems like the insurance lobby just completely tanked that. And so for me as a member, I think at LACCD, we have 50 vendors on our list. I went through and looked at it. And so the stat that you shared on that slide, I thought was really helpful. Like it was 38 or whatever. And then there's 3 that in the green, I think, and 3, 2, and then 38. That's a shocking. I have a couple more questions, but I want to defer to the committee members. So go ahead, Ken, and then Karen, and then if you have something new to add.
Yeah, one other question I have is, I don't know if you have disaggregated data on the age level of folks who are participating. I know that a number of my colleagues who, since in the last 3 years that I've been on the board, I've been conscientiously trying to educate my colleagues, and they say, I wish I knew this information sooner. And these are the more mid-year, late career educators. And so I'm wondering if there's ways that the team can partner up with, say, local teachers association or something like that. I know that Leonard Gober does a really good job of the retirement workshop that he does with his team.
Pre-retirement
And
workshop,
and LAUSD. And I don't know if the team is, maybe the team can partner with him with regards to a section on pension too, because I know there's a lot of folks who ask about that. They are. Okay.
That's like old school, man. That's 10 minutes ago. No, I'm just kidding. They're all over it.
And so just partnering up with a lot of teachers union at the beginning of the school year, just getting out there to orientations helps too with especially with early career educators, because I had no idea all of this stuff existed, but I was one of the fortunate one who was able to sign on early. But there are lots of my colleagues who don't know that don't know that information. So hopefully we can get a lot of that education piece out.
Yes, that is a key metric that we are closely monitoring and setting some aggressive targets around, not just for Pension 2, overall for engagement and awareness of benefits and retirement planning. So one of the metrics we report on internally quarterly and then produce annually at the end of the fiscal year for the board is related to members under 44. And then in particular for Pension 2, that's something that we monitor as part of our regular plan review data as well.
Good ideas. Karen, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. There was one statistic that you had 33,187 participants in 2004. Are those broken down by the districts that they are employed, or how do you know how many, where do they come from, basically? Or is that just the number of participants in the program? I guess as far as doing more outreach or things like that is kind of where I'm headed for that.
Was it on the program growth? Was that the chart that you're looking at? Yeah, those are planned participants. Those are within Pension 2.
Right.
So the total population of our Pension 2 program.
The total, but you were planning to do more outreach into different districts. So in those districts, which other districts are you going to do more outreach to have them put 403, Pension 2 on their desired list? So
Yeah,
is
I wouldn't
that,
say there's a specific list per se. We do have, our team is engaging with a lot of our membership as well as the school affiliates out there.
Okay.
Some employers do come to us and they'll ask us if they can adopt the Pension 2 program, especially charter schools.
okay,
And so, but if you know of anybody, please let us know. So oftentimes, as
Okay.
Kate
Maybe you guys
mentioned,
need to hire
there's a
Ken.
shifting of these vendors, these third-party administrators that we end up missing out, and we don't know until somebody tells us.
right,
But
right.
yeah, no, we'll go out there, especially with the larger school districts, we keep a very close eye on what's going on. But a lot of the smaller ones, we have to actively engage with our membership to find out.
And then just one more thing about, we all know as teachers, we're in the defined benefit program. Do you think that there's any stigma behind the term defined contribution and whether or not they want to do that? Or, I don't know, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't know so much about the term defined contribution carrying a connotation that impacts behavior. I think there's a misunderstanding of those two terms at a very basic level, which are, if you really think about the name of those, it makes sense. But that is something that in some of the research that we did with Accenture, with members, is a large number of members do not fully understand the defined benefit, especially early in their career, and then taking that next step to have the understanding of that gap. What I would say is, I think the fact that it's voluntary probably allows people to immediately think, oh, well, I'm going to opt out of that
I don't pay
because
for
I
it.
don't have, and that's the challenge that, Ken, I think you're getting to is younger members, it's more challenging for them to find an allocation in their daily budget to set aside beyond their daily living and immediate expenses. So I think the fact that, we categorize it, and it's true that it's the voluntary component of the hybrid retirement system, I do think that that's something that could impact members' willingness to even continue reading once they see that.
Yes, okay.
I will say the DCDB kind of language has been around for, I don't know, I'm not a historian, but Jack Enos would know probably, 100 years or however long. So to me, like DB and defined benefit is pension, and even pension is a word that for my demographic, we're like, pension. Like it sounds like you're a steel worker in Michigan or something, or I guess Ohio.
Thank you.
So I think it can be confusing for different generations in terms of the language we use. But with that, Michelle, you have a question? Go ahead.
Question, and I guess it kind of goes to Ken's point, and about just getting the information out, and to your point about the fact that when they hear voluntary and they're younger and they're just trying to live. So I don't want to assume, but maybe you can clarify. I'm assuming Pension 2 is similar to like CalPERS savings, additional savings that allows so much. There's a maximum contribution, but then after a certain age, is there a catch-up contribution? So perhaps there's some targeted messaging for older individuals who have been in the system longer that they can kind of catch up. Maybe they have a little bit more in their pocketbook to contribute. Okay, I just made that assumption, but I didn't want to make that.
You're
that
100% correct.
Okay.
Our 457 operates under the same laws and regulations as CalPERS 457,
Okay.
and then same for the 403B, what those contribution limits are, what the required minimum distributions are, what the catch-up provisions, and things coming in with Secure 2.0, that is how the programs are administered.
And my final questions are around, I still struggle. So I work with our members in our district when they have questions around 403Bs and 457. Thankfully, I've been getting a lot of inquiries lately. And so I send them to the 403B Compare website. I think it's confusing to me. Why do we use a third-party administrator? So like in our district, if you want to sign up for a 403B, you use TCG. And for the 457, we have a single vendor, right?
Yes.
Voya. And so I think I'm confused when I sit on the board of CalSTRS, okay? So not that I should know everything, but I feel like it's not my first rodeo. And so then when members ask me, it's two different processes in our district to sign up for, it's just, and again, back to frictionless, if I have members who have to do 4 or 5 different steps to sign up, they're not gonna sign up. So it's that same guy at the benefits conference, it's third time and he signs up. So can you, help me understand, like, why do we use, I have my ideas of why we do, but why do we use third party? Do we need to? And how might we be able, we as in CalSTRS and Pension 2, be able to work with districts? Like, the paperwork's hard to find out. I know you're not responsible for my district's poor website design, but it's just, I feel like I've been, 18 years now in this district, and it just seems like it's one of those things that when you make it hard and then it's almost like impossible to find the forms, then we can't sign up. So could you talk about the TPAs a little bit? And then I don't understand why we have a single vendor for 457, but then we have the Wild Wild West 50 vendors for 457, or 403B, sorry, excuse me. And then I don't know, whatever comments you have about how to help our districts with signing members
Excellent
up.
question. So I'll give a high-level overview, and then I'll give Patrick the opportunity to go into a little more detail, or Carrie if she wants to add in. So why are there TPAs? Well, because of the complexity that you've alluded to and that Michelle was talking about around administering these within compliance with laws and IRS regulations.
Okay.
That is a big effort, which is often not resourced or staffed at a school district. That doesn't exist, so they contract it out to experts, just like us, and all the other vendors, or especially in the public space, as well as in corporate. We rely on record keepers to administer that portion of the program, because it would be too cumbersome to set up all of those networks and maintain those resources. So districts and county offices are in that same situation as making sure that what they're doing as the administrator of that plan and those plan documents are kept in compliance. It's just outside the scope of how their staff are operating. And I'm sure Patrick can add to that. And then the complexity you mentioned around the salary reduction agreement is another thing, that we only have so many levers we can pull because of the structure in the marketplace, and that we are reliant on the employer and the TPA. Each of them have different processes to follow. And then, of course, engaging with our record keeper as well. So there's just multiple entities involved. So the approach that we take is educating, providing assistance. So Patrick mentioned on 403B Compare, we've taken the step to ensure that the salary reduction agreement process is available there. As soon as a new participant enrolls, we actively reach out to them with customized information for them to follow for their particular employer to set up those contributions, because it is a multi-step process. Once you enroll in the plan, you need to take additional steps to actually contribute to it. So our focus, again, just because of those barriers and constraints, comes back to education, to resources, to support that Pension 2 team that is on the phones all day, Monday through Friday. That's a service that they help educators with, is to navigate that process. Same with our Pension 2 sessions. If they want to meet with someone individually to walk them through it or support them, those are some of the ways that we work with that.
So if a member goes to the 403B Compare site to look at fees, they can actually enroll there in a 403B? They can, yes? If that's the case, man, I will do that.
So they'll have a link to the site, to the vendor, to be able to go ahead and do enrollment. We try to put as much information, but again, this is also the vendors are providing this information to the site. So we maintain, try to keep as accurate as we can with audits, but the vendors themselves will go in and put as much information. Of course, they want somebody to enroll, so they'll put a link to that enrollment site or how to do so, in addition to the contributions like the salary reduction agreements.
Okay. I'm guessing because 457s and 403Bs are different tax codes, that's why we have to do different paperwork, or is that just my district?
They are slightly different. So 403Bs came out early on. You guys have heard of tax sheltered annuities, kind of talking about that complexity. Tax sheltered annuities for the older generation, that's all they know. 403Bs was kind of the new thing. And that was 1958, and it wasn't until like 1974 that annuities were no longer the only product. That's where mutual funds came on board. And then in 1978, 457s came about. And the language in 457s was structured a little differently to be a little more fiduciary. And so that's why you see with employers, they don't have 51 different vendors. They'll have 1, 2, or 3, or 0 457 options. So if a school has both, 403B and 457, I think that's great. But you'll see on the 457 side, a vendor versus the 403B of an all offering the Wild West. And that kind of goes back to why there's a TPA, because of the
Yeah.
information sharing agreements and the IRS threatening to come audit and check out the school district and make sure everything's in order. They don't do that work, so they'll hire somebody else to do it for them.
And why did, so I'm asking questions that don't have answers to them, but, sort of like, why do we have a single vendor for 457, but we can't, get the single vendor, or at least, like, I would love to say, here are the top 3 vendors for 403B. That's my dream before I collect my pension. I would like to see, just because I do think our members, it's kind of like when you go to the store and you see a colored package or the marketing name, you kind of get attracted to that and think it's good, or the name of, but then if it's high fees, and so it's just challenging for our members to make decisions. So I'm definitely grateful for 403B. I think that's a step in the right direction. But yeah, there's some work to do in this area, I think, and like you're saying, Ken, I think it's a good partnership between our faculty organizations and unions and our districts and you guys, because I've answered so many emails in the last couple of weeks, and I'm literally like, here's the form that you have to use for this, and here's the form you have to, and it just comes off complicated, and I'd like to make it easier. So thank you so much. Is there anything else you have to share at this point? Is that all right? Thank you so much. That's really, really interesting. Thank you. Yep, I guess we can do that now. We have, it's in a different item.
Oh, no, he's raising his.
Oh, but, okay. Right, but we have 2 people, okay. Brian, do you want to chair this committee? Just kidding. Any members of the public want to comment on item 4?
There are no members of the public in the queue for item 4.
Great. I see a review for information request. Thanks, you guys. Appreciate you. Nice to meet you, Carrie. So Jasmine, any review for information requests that you saw?
Potentially one, but I just wanted to check with you.
Yeah.
For item 4, did you want, I'm not sure if Kate already answered it, but data on the pension to market share across California and how we can use
I guess
that?
that's to be continued, ... Kate. So if you, at some point, I would love to get more data on the market share. If that's when you're able to pin down the districts and what they offer, it'd just be interesting to go like 60% of community colleges have pension too. At some point, maybe that's one of your wish lists, I'm guessing too. So thanks, Jasmine. Any public comment on that item? I got you, Brian. I was joking, but I should be formal because my lawyer's here, so I have to make sure. 6 is the draft agenda for the next meeting. Lisa, do you have anything
Yeah,
you
there's
wanna?
just 2 information items for the next, in January when they come back. One is the customer experience that Kate mentioned.
Yeah.
The maturity assessment and program design. And fingers crossed that AB 1997 gets signed.
Let's
If
hope
it does,
so.
there'll be the changes and benefits to the credible compensation law simplification for you to hear.
Yay, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. And then item 7, we have opportunity for the statements from the public, and I know we have 2 folks ready to speak, so we'll take Sandy Keaton first. Sandy, I think you know a little something about 403Bs and you're probably sitting there going, Sharon, I know all the answers to your questions.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sandy Keaton. I'm actually Leonard Goldberg at this meeting
Oh,
because
wow.
Leonard
There's a lot of-
is taking a group of students on a field trip.
Awesome.
So even though I'm retired, I'm representing actives. So initially, I wanted to thank Benefits and Services. I had a couple of colleagues come up to me and say, oh, before my wife retired, we had to call CalSTRS, and we didn't get a recording. We got a person, and they could answer the question. And I said, I told you so. All this time I've been telling you that. So I wanted to really thank you because they were so excited and so happy to get everything answered quickly and correctly.
Awesome.
Now that you've talked about 403B, I cannot stop. Sharon, I
hear
totally
ya.
agree with you.
I hear ya.
If we only, could have 1, 2, or 3 really good vendors. But it's a big issue. I do want to compliment you, though. At NAGDO, which is the National Association for Government Defined Contribution Administrators, that I attended last week, I think, in Phoenix. I don't know where I've been. They were talking about target date funds. And are they really appropriate just to say someone's going to retire on such and such date? And why aren't we looking at risk? And I thought, Pension II's been doing that forever. And I said that. So I wanted to say that too. And I've noticed, we're very fortunate that LA Unified, when they established their 457B, they had to also establish a Retirement Investment Advisory Committee. And I've been on that committee since its establishment, first representing UTLA and now representing the school board. And I've noticed an increase in pension too. And my personal opinion is, number one, we've always had rules that we couldn't have salespeople on campus, but you know how that went. But then COVID hit, and then schools really had to crack down on who was coming in. And I really feel that that's made a change. And sorry it was through COVID, but it was positive. And we will have a financial literacy Zoom workshop that I will make sure you all receive the link to. And that is where we discuss our 457B and 403B. We've had Dan Otter speak. I've spoken. We have a lot of different things. And we try to also incorporate what educators can do in the classroom. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your decades of work in this space, Sandy. So thank you. And then we have Matt Kelly. Matt? Oh, did you have something else? Oh. Is Matt here? Okay. Well, blessings on you, Matt. Go ahead, Brian. Sure. You don't need to apologize.
I wanted to compliment Dr. Keaton. I think about 15 years ago, she cornered me in one of these meetings and just started letting me know that people were using the CalSTRS logo and name when they were going to these, creating these pizza parlors and pizza parties and trying to market to teachers. And she provided us with a lot of information. And the legal office actually set up a system that when we're notified that somebody is using our name, we actually go after them for trademark infringement. So we really have to
forward
thank.
you those emails, Brian, when we get
Please
them?
do.
I will.
Please do. If you see anyone using
Yeah.
our name that's not associated with us, please let us know. But it really was the efforts of Dr. Keaton that brought it to our attention.
No, thank
I
you
just
for
wanted to
mentioning
point
that,
that out.
Brian. We still get those emails all the time. It is, again, my whack-a-mole comment applies because it's just, they make it look like it's CalSTRS or CalPERS and it's not. So yes, so thank you, Dr. Keaton. Thank you to our team. I don't see any other questions. I was going to do a pitch for Dan Otter has that app, that web podcast, right? Teach and Retire Rich with a CFA guy. And I always tell our members to listen to it. And they promote pension too. I think it's in their top 2 or whatever. And so they have a lot of good things to say about pension too. And that makes us very proud when we hear that. So with that, I believe I'm looking at you, Ron. Are we ready to adjourn? All right, committee. All right, well, thank you for your hard work. I hope everyone has a good rest of the week. Thanks, everyone. And we'll see you in November. See you in Cincinnati.